So good afternoon, everybody. I think there's quite a lot of participants online. We've got 1 or 2 on site as well. So I just want to greet everybody and welcome you to this week's noon meeting, which is hosted by the Environmental Health Division. And the presenters will be Tatum, Louw, and Eunice, Tshilengu. We'll be talking about the Pesticide Weekly and the chemical network, which is previously known as the Pesticide List Server, for those that know about it beforehand. So I hand over to Tatum. Just to note that the network might not be completely secured. There's a possibility that it might that we might break away. Hopefully that won't happen, but I'll just let you know about it. So I'll hand over to Tatum.
Okay, good. Thanks, Prof. Akil. So thank you for those in the room today and then those online as well. So just to give you a brief rundown through the presentation for today. So we're going to be speaking to the 2 newsletters that we have that come from the Division of Environmental Health. So namely the Pesticide Weekly as well as the Chemicals Network newsletter. So the main aim, I suppose, of this presentation is that we would like to generate ideas from the audience. So online, you're welcome to use the chat room. So we want it to be as live as possible, and then in the room as well. We'll try and incorporate all the responses as both settings can be involved. And it's just for us to understand how we can best get our communication that we are currently doing and work that we have been doing for the past few years out to low and middle income countries, which is the main purpose of these newsletters. So we'll go through a brief background of the newsletters. Thereafter, we will then go through our specific membership for the Pesticide Weekly as well as the Chemicals Network. And after that, we'll then go into the newsletter itself. And the intention of that will be to just show people the type of resources that are shared and better ways that we can then improve that, as well as how you can use what is already available. So I think just context to the project in general, so where the 2 newsletters come from. So Prof. Andrea Rother, who is the head of the Environmental Division, started these initially, as Prof. Akil said, the Pest List Server in 1997. And so all of this work was based on the fact that there's growing evidence that people are facing in low and middle income countries exposure to both pesticides and chemicals, with its occupational exposure. Just if everyone can mute themselves in the meeting room, but so it's just exposure to chemicals, whether it's farm workers, regulators who's working with these type of issues. And so the intention of this newsletter was to build capacity in these areas or in low and middle income countries. We found that there's a lack of capacity programs that already exist. And so one of these avenues that we've decided to work on these issues is through e-communication, which is basically the premise of our presentation today, is how to improve this method of communication or health communication, is how can we do this better electronically. So this work, as I said, has been from 1997 already started. So it built on more than 22 years of pesticide and chemical related work that has been done at the University of Cape Town. And it is to just recognize our funders, the Swedish Chemical Agency, who currently funds the project work that we are doing now. So I think just a brief background into the two newsletters that we have. So as we said, it builds on work that has already been done. So in 2004, both UCT and the Tropical Pesticide Research Institute in Arusha, Tanzania, established the Work and Health Program in Southern Africa with SIDA funding. And one of the key projects was the Action on Health Impacts of Pesticides that aimed to improve pesticide safety materials in SADC regions, implement interventions to reduce pesticide usage and improve agricultural policies and pesticide legislation. As I mean, I think it's something we're still currently facing, that there's a lot of challenges and gaps in legislation, specifically in low and middle income countries. So we're trying to bridge that gap between higher income countries and lower middle income countries, so we can all have a harmonized legislation approach to dealing with these issues that is actually faced more in the countries that need it. So to improve surveillance about pesticide exposure and health impacts in the region. So one of the problems that so yeah, one of the surveillance issues that is being faced is pesticide suicide. So the reporting of that, setting up of pesticide centers in low and middle income countries. So it's just to improve surveillance and awareness on that, and also to foster strong regional network between the different, and particularly SADC, which is the region we work with, but within low and middle income countries, is so that neighboring countries can be aware of what each other are doing and so that they can follow this harmonized approach. So as I mentioned, the UCT pesticide e-network was formerly called the LIST server and started in 1997. I'm not sure if you're aware, but of the Sept, which is another project that birthed from the same project, which is the Southern African Pesticide Regulators Forum. And it's similarly a forum that is created for regulators in SADC. And there are other ones as well in Africa that we know of, and as well as globally, that all focus on strengthening technical support and capacity in these regions for dealing with pesticide-related issues. And another project that we have that birthed from this is the DPRM project, which is the diploma or the postgraduate diploma for pesticide risk management. And I think since 2011, more than 65 regulators, inspectors, technical staff from low and middle income countries graduated from this program. I think the program is based on a lot of pesticide management global standards, such as the FAO Code of Conduct. So it's really to strengthen as much as we can, both on an academic level, as well as on an information level, where our pesticide network and chemicals network come from. And the chemicals network was similarly started in 2020. So just quickly to go through the aims of the project. So the project aims to strengthen the knowledge networks and programs that were developed by UCT, to broaden the scope of capacity development work to include more countries, more regulators and topics, to reduce and prevent the negative impacts from chemicals on health, on human health and the environment. So to build capacity, national capacity in lower middle income countries, to implement strong legislation, to increase information sharing, including among exposed low literate populations, and to increase preventative measures such as alternatives that are available. So I think just overall the project intends to encourage the chemical management systems in low and middle income countries, so it can be effective in preventing the risk that comes from our exposures to chemicals and pesticides, despite the resource challenges that are faced. So we're just going to move into the next slide, which Eunice will take over. And this is just some of the advantages and challenges that we faced with our e-communications in low and middle income countries.
Thanks, Tatum. Hi, everyone. Welcome to everyone, and also to the people online. My name is Eunice, and I work with Prof. Andrea on this project on this chemical project, and I'm responsible for working on this newsletter, the Chemical Network newsletter, and I'm also responsible for facilitating the discussions of the Chemicals Network. So while we share the newsletter, we also take note of the things that we do right and the challenges that we face. So I will be talking to you about a few advantages that we saw in sharing these newsletters, especially targeting low and middle income countries. These newsletters will help to increase access to pesticide and chemical related information for all individuals in low and middle income countries. I don't know about you, but if you have encountered a newsletter on pesticide or chemicals, and with this newsletter will help people from various backgrounds to access this information free of charge and get more knowledge on chemicals and pesticide. We will also help to raise awareness on pesticide exposure, because in South Africa, South Africa is one of the great importer of pesticide, and many people, farmers and people living around close to farms are exposed to pesticides. So while sharing this information, will help them to know more about these pesticide and the health risks that can arise from them. And we'll have to provide information to regulators to make informed decisions to pesticide and chemical policies. Our network has many regulators from the various African countries. So while we share this information to them regularly on a monthly basis, they will be able to have the knowledge, enough knowledge to make decisions when it comes to what to do with these pesticides or highly hazardous pesticides and chemicals that are just, in the continent. And we also have to encourage engagement and knowledge sharing among chemicals and pesticide experts. So part of our work is to organize the online discussions where people gather together and they get to share ideas on any topic that could be in policy or awareness raising. And then we sharing these newsletters, we help to encourage them to share the knowledge and exchange their experiences. About the challenges that we encounter is that there's a low interaction of the newsletter from people from low and middle income countries. This we notice from the amount of times the newsletter gets opened from people, and Tatum will share later on the statistics. And we notice that there's a really low interaction with the newsletter compared to the amount of people we have that subscribe to the newsletter. There is a limited access. Actually, the low and middle income countries face the challenge of having a limited access to devices outside of work hours. So many people have access to computers when they are at work, but when they get at home, maybe they just have access to their phone, maybe it's not a smartphone. And so getting access to this newsletter and on hand all the time is not really accessible to everyone in low and middle income countries. And that is a challenge for us because we want more and more people to open these newsletters and engage with the content. There's a lack of poor internet connectivity. The African continent itself, it is reported that it's 22% only people who have access to internet. And to access these newsletters, even by email, you need access to internet or by data, which is a challenge that many African continents face. And not everyone can have that luxury of having internet or data all the time. And also, we have a problem, there's a diversity of language. This is a good thing, but our newsletter is only shared in English, while there are other languages as French, Swahili, and other languages that dominate the African continent that we don't share this newsletter in. And that could be a challenge for some of our members who speak French, but they will maybe like to share this with other of their colleagues, but they can't because of the language barrier that we face. These are a few challenges, so you can take note of them and maybe provide some ideas on how we can address these. Just a little background about the actual newsletter. Tatum gave a broad background on the project. So this newsletter, so we target our key beneficiaries are low and middle income countries and regulators. We have technical staff, decision makers, people who attend chemical agreement meeting. We have professors, researchers. We are targeting those people because they will help to make decisions, or they will help to reach a broader community in their countries, respective countries. Our partners are global experts in pesticide and chemical risk management. So we have people who work at UNEP, FAO, WHO, and other organizations that help us to work on these projects. And our beneficiaries and partners, they represent they come from a broad sector. They're not all focused on chemicals or pesticides. They come from the food, the agricultural sector, the health sector, educational sector. Then, so we have a broad, a rich community, and we would like to really share this information with as many people as we can. Tatum will take you through some statistics on our members and the opening of the newsletter.
So just to go through the membership, so we said that once, this is firstly, the slide just shows the current format of the first page of the editorial of the Pesticide Weekly. I think we've covered this, that it started in 1997 and it was started with 30 members only, which we'll see now grew to over 300 members. Initially, we would send out a link for people to join. And so that's also one of the challenges, is that people might not be receiving this link to click to join for the newsletter. So if you have any ways that we can include that, to keep it for later in the session. But just to give you a membership breakdown, so for the Pesticide Weekly, we have 697 people that are currently signed up to this newsletter. Majority, as you can see, come from African countries, so 61% are from Africa, and the others are from Europe. But as we mentioned, we'll see now in our top clicks of this newsletter that the top 5 countries, only one country represents a lower middle income country, which is South Africa. The highest group is the USA, which opens up, and following South Africa is the UK, then the Netherlands, and lastly Switzerland. So as from the project background, our aim is really to engage with low and middle income countries. We're happy that we have this high click rate from the other countries, but the intention is really to spread the information that we are sharing to low and middle income country workers. So then the chemicals newsletter, so this started in 2020. So it currently has a membership of 200 members. So this is still a new newsletter or network that we are working with. And it aims to improve industrial and consumer regulation and control these and institutional capacity within low and middle income countries, and with the overall goal to protect human health and the environment through collaborative capacity building efforts. And if we look at the statistics, so as we said, over 200, so 237 members are currently signed up. 70% of our members that are signed up are from Africa, which I think is quite the dominant region for both the newsletters. But as you can see that the US is again leading in the top clicks. So for the top clicks, we use MailChimp, and we're able to track to see how many of the members were signed up, open up the newsletter as well as all the resources they click on. And so this is where this information is generated from. So for to give you context for specifically the Pesticide Weekly, we send over 40 newsletters in a year. So it's quite telling to see that the US is leading in opening this and not low and middle income countries, which is a challenge for us that we want to overcome. And then just to walk through the newsletters. Just click on it. So this is currently the format of how our newsletters look. I'll just scroll through and sort it over to just go over the beginning section. But I'll just go to the useful links while I am here. So we have a section where we share useful links, which is the most recent news articles and journal articles. We try our best with this section to keep information that is strongly peer-reviewed, evidence-based, is from globally renowned news journals, so that we know that we're not just posting anything that could be biased or misleading. So specifically for the news section, these are majority of all news articles, and we have a notification system set up so that every week we receive the new information that has been posted globally. So we group this into the main headings. So as you'll see for this newsletter, we had on regulation. So we had a whole lot of articles that were relevant to regulatory changes that has been made in countries. So this would usually include where the pesticides or chemicals, certain ones have been banned in a country. So then we would say in Europe that this pesticide has been banned, and we think that's very useful for low and middle income countries to see that, oh, this is something that is hazardous for us, because most of the time we assume that it isn't, when it actually is something that is highly on alert in another country. So I think that's something very useful for this regulation section. We also see about news articles about where there are smuggling of pesticides, which countries is that most frequently happening in. So you start to see trends over time with the newsletters, because we bracket them in according to the countries that they come from, the articles that's shared. So the environment is similar. It's just information on what is, perhaps if it's chemical waste in this country, what is the outcome. And in South Africa, we recently had a pesticide industry that exploded, and throughout the whole neighboring community, there was a lot of environmental contamination as well as health issues that arise from that. So those were news articles for the Pesticide Weekly that was quite prevalent within those few weeks that it took place. So it's always up-to-date information that people might not be seeing on other outlets. And then just the research section. So for the research section, as I mentioned, we take journal articles. So these are articles that we have to review and make sure that they are peer-reviewed, that they come from good journals, that there's no bias, there's no conflict of interest. So these are little checklists that we have to go through when we are reading the articles. And again, we group them according to the environmental impact that perhaps these newsletters are focusing on, the health impacts, and then as well as regulation. And again, these are all new resources that are shared. So it will very rarely be information shared from between 2020 to 2019. It's always the most up-to-date information shared. And we have a similar section on guidance documents. So we just keep a list of the various guidance documents that the global intergovernmental organizations are releasing that are available and mostly do focus on increasing or improving regulation in low and middle income countries. So we keep a list of those documents for people to access, as well as the GHS resources, so specifically if it's labeling concerns that people do have, we have certain resources for that. And lastly, we have a section on opportunities and events, which would just show the different trainings. So if people would like to apply for the UCT's Professional Masters in Chemical Risk Management, different psych and e-learning courses, and these also change and get, this is a old newsletter, so by the next one, this will be taken out. So as you can see, it's constantly updated, the various conferences that are available. And again, once we pass it, we take it out. This in the next one will be taken out. And then the multimedia, which is the webinars that other agencies have conducted. So we also put the recordings down for people. So I think it's very useful if you need to be in touch and keep up to date with what's happening globally. And I think it's very beneficial for low and middle income countries to not only know what's happening in sort of their regions, but also what's happening in high income countries. So I think, yeah, that's quite the highlight. Then Eunice will just take us through the beginning of the newsletter, which speaks to the e-waste or editorials and the professional.
Thanks, Tatum. So I'll start from the beginning. So when we share a newsletter, you usually get an overview of what it looks like, the issue. This was a June issue, and you get a sneak peek of the topics, and you can just choose to click whichever topic of interest to you, or you can just scroll down. And we usually like to put some images that are appealing and to the people and to the topic of discussion. And this newsletter talks about e-waste and circular economy. We have a feature article to address the topic itself, address the background of the topic, and it can be general or specific, depends on how we approach this topic. And for this one, I think it was a bit general because we wanted to address the circular economy and the background to it, because we have so these topics are arranged according to a discussion that is going to come. Maybe in the next month we have a discussion on circular economy, and we have this newsletter to inform the topic. We share this feature article for people to understand what it is about. So when you come to the discussion, you kind of have an idea of what we're talking about. And the process that we go through, so I usually draft it, but the UCT team helps with the review of it. We review the feature article, make sure it's sound and addresses what the right topic. And after, once it's all good, quality check, then we gonna make sure that it's here to make sure that we give good information to people. And then we have a section where we address the discussion and invite people to join the discussion. So this is really useful, especially for our target people, low and middle income countries, because these topics are mostly, it's high income countries that come up with all these new concepts, like the concept of circular economy. We didn't know it maybe 10 years ago, but now it's something that is talked about. And we like to do this new feature article to address especially these technical concepts that people don't really know much of. And then you have an opportunity to share on your social media. We also give a sneak peek of what the discussion is coming up, who's going to present. Like this one was a presenter from UNITA. We give a topic, the time, and we also give some dates that you can keep for upcoming discussions. So we take it as an opportunity to also introduce our online discussions. And another part that is really exciting about this newsletter is the success story. So the success story is for other people to get to share their stories as well. So we focus it on the topic of discussion. Since this one was about circular economy, we approached someone who was, I think it was something about they were conducting if South African transition toward the circular economy. So that was a research that was conducted and the report was published. So we approached Prof. Aro, who's from UCT, and to just give us details of why did he conduct this? How was it conducted? And this will help other people in maybe other low middle income countries to just have an idea of what is happening, and is this something that is done in our continent? And if you see someone from South Africa do it, then maybe you can also do it in your country. And this gives we usually conduct is an interview, very informal interview via email. You just give us why did you do it, and what are the challenges, what are the lessons learned, and if you have any tips for other people who would like to conduct such assessment in their countries. And we share it in this newsletter for people to get to understand it. And so we usually, every time when we want to draft a newsletter, we usually call out to people and say, if you have something to share on this topic, please contact us and we would like to hear from you. And we'll use it in our newsletter. So I don't know if there's any comment on this before we move to the next. Not right now. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Tatum, you have anything?
Maybe you can monitor the chat room from here.
Okay.
You can just log in. Okay, great. So I think that is the chemical newsletter, and the pesticide weekly follows a similar approach. And we will be now opening up the floor and we'll just monitor the chat room, because as I said, the main intention for this presentation is for us to brainstorm, and we want to hear from everyone that is in the meeting room and in the room on what are the best ways that we can improve our information to be shared to low and middle income countries. So we are, as we mentioned, targeting the regulators, policymakers, decision makers, as well as academics or the industry. So there's a wide range of audience that we want to target, and we really want to improve on this capacity building program. So we're going to open up a Mentimeter poll, which will share the link in the chat room. And that way we can all see live what is going, everyone's responses, and we can all interact with that. And we will also be monitoring the chat room so that we can from there sort of talk to what people are saying. So the question we have is, how can the newsletters be improved to reach more stakeholders in low and middle income countries? So bearing the challenges that we face, which we said was language barriers. We have people have little access to Wi-Fi or technology, perhaps outside of their work time, or if they're in their work, they might work in the field often. So how are things that, because these are issues that we might not be able to overcome necessarily, so we can't overcome the issue of technology, but how can we sort of improve our newsletters? Is it maybe sending the newsletters at the time that we know SADC will be able to receive it within their working hours, or someone in Asia Pacific will be able to receive it? So how can we overcome sort of those problems? And so, yeah, we really open up the floor. Thank you for listening, to the people in the room as well. And if you have any questions as well, please do ask and we can just brainstorm. So for the people in the room, you can go to menti.com and you can just put in the code that's on the screen. And once you put in your responses, it will pop up live in the room. So I'll also just share the link in the chat room. So you're welcome to in your responses.
Yes, but can I just get a sense of, when you said the team, how many, because a team can be like two.
Yes.
So how many people on the team, and what sort of funding is available for something like translation?
Great. So I'm not sure the microphone reaches, so I'm just going to speak.
Yes.
I'll repeat the question. So the question asked how many people are in the team and what is the funding that is available to us. So currently in the team, we are 5, I would say. So Prof. Andrea Rother is the main forum moderator. So she's sort of the content direction or lead and will help us with just her knowledge and expertise on these topics, and how we can then translate it into the newsletter. And then we have 2 people that are responsible for writing the respective newsletters. one who focuses on pesticides and the other one on chemicals. And then we also have 2 reviewers. So we have our project manager next to you. And then we also have another reviewer who's also in the School of Public Health. And so they go over to make sure that if it's grammatically correct, everything is flowing well, that the content is in line with, it's not being mistranslated. So that's our team is of 5 people. And currently our funding is from Chemi, so the Swedish Chemical Agency. So it forms part of a bigger project of capacity building that they are working on, that they're working with UCT. I'm not sure, Maxine, if you have any comments, or Andrea in the chat room, you're welcome to also give your responses.
So I have a very specific question around, is there any set aside funding for translation?
Oh, for
It seems
translation.
it seems like that's the key. One of the key issues here is that you're only capable or able at this point to have that process of reviewing and checking in a single language.
So we have French, which is Eunice, so she's able to translate. Yeah.
You're all
So
the
it's
French
France.
people in Africa.
And the other reviewer as well was also paid to review, but also can translate for us. But I think the issue comes is we have this capacity for us as a team to then do that, because then it would have to go another level of review. So for the Pesticide Weekly, we release it bi-weekly. So it leaves us with a very tight schedule of researching the appropriate topics. From researching, we need to then make sure we have enough time for the reviewers to receive it. Then when we get it back from the reviewers, like the thesis process, we get it back and we have to fix the comments or the mistakes that has been made before we can actually publish it. So I think for us, perhaps then something would be to consider is capacity, how we can increase our own capacity for language. But I think French is what we have now. I know that there are apps. I mean, if we maybe do really, if we see that this is a big issue, and if everyone else thinks that this is something we really need to work on, to just see what apps are available that are also grammatically as correct as we can get. But yeah, if you have any suggestions on how
consultant right now, that is a application.
I can add someone.
And a consultant email address. We even notify you should you have any direct inquiries on your application. This is the
Okay, we found the person. So I see Glory says that language should be country specific based on stakeholders. So perhaps an extra layer of reviewing for us to do is to see what are the target countries that within the capacity that we can work with, that we want to reach. So is it French in DRC, or is it Swahili because of Tanzania is our main audience? So probably to filter down to see which countries. But I guess it expands beyond Africa, and if we're looking at Indonesia or India or
I think the question I have is because it's this thing we all struggle with if we were across it, but also that you can't keep just adding expectations onto what is actually a very small team trying to produce a newsletter. And it has to be a situation where, so one day, Eunice, if you are somewhere else doing something big and there's not a French speaking. So I suppose, the question also is how do we do translating that's sustainable and not just dependent on
the
who happens
person
to be there at the moment, because it's a, and it has to, that's work, it's labor, it requires funding. Just to expect somebody to translate because they speak language is also not fully fair, because there's enough to do in a newsletter just as it is. So, yeah.
I see Andrea commenting that translating is costly. So the first step would be to increase opening up of the newsletter and then identify which language to prioritize. Which I guess for us also to look currently, maybe it's not the top 5 clicks, but somewhere down the line, which is the next country that's opening up the newsletter, and to start with them. Then I see more comments. Sorry. Okay, so we have another.
Yeah, just quickly. In terms of the number of clicks that you presented, we often focus on the broader picture, but how many clicks are actually from African countries? Is there very few clicks, or are there? That's the other countries participate.
So I know from. So the question was, the clicks we presented were the top clicks. So what is the percentage of clicks from low and middle income countries or Africa or Asia Pacific? Or so for us, I recall when I done my for the pesticide weekly was that the least clicked on, so the countries that clicked the least on the newsletters were from Africa. So I don't know the exact percentage now, but we do have percentages of that to see, okay, what is, but they fell within the lower group, and the leading was still Europe and in the US.
So can I ask
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
Also? Now, also a question about the, I mean, so click can come from the US, but is that with or without VPNs? And do you know if any, if people who are clicking from the States are possibly diaspora community members? So people from the African countries who are happen to be based and who study. So because, you know, just to say the US is not, on one hand, it's revealing. But on the other, not necessarily, because we don't like, do you have any finer granular detail, or does it literally just log?
So
We do.
yeah.
We
can
can track.
so we can write that down into the chat room, is that we will then put the meeting for us to have track of this, is to then look at finer detail of, is the US actually US citizens, or is it people that are coming from Africa, that are just based there for a short time, perhaps for academic reasons, or okay. So I see, I'm not sure if the person can just clarify in the chat room a RSS feed link that can be embedded on the websites. So I'm not sure if anyone knows what RSS is, but you can just clarify in the chat room. I'll just look at some more. So someone said sometimes images can communicate easily. I know that within the division, we do have a lot of posters and stickers and policy briefs or things that are available. But I think the issue with those ones are that they might not be new, as in what we're trying to sort of run with the newsletter is new information, but we can definitely have a section on that with all the previous posters. I mean, they're still relevant to today. So that's something that we can also create. So images.
Can you go?
The person who commented on RSS, if you could just expand on that. Provide finer details of both opening. I think that is from here. Share information with the newspapers to advertise in a daily bulletin. So that's also, if anyone has comments on that, so something feasible we can do. I wonder with that, because I know with newspapers you have to pay for an ad to be placed in there. It's sort of not, you can just approach unless it's an NGO newspaper or something that, but I mean, maybe a good way could be to link with NGOs who have newsletters, is to say, here's a link to another newsletter. So sort of work within the networks that we have and other new networks as well.
Yeah, maybe we could identify other organizations who are working on this chemicals and maybe try to advertise our newsletters, if that could help to reach more.
Yeah, so obviously they were to comment on the website, I'm not sure, and also from the presentation, this information is not available on, you can't go to the website and get the information from the website. Right?
We have the actual chemicals, like the project website, like Chemicals Network website and the Pesticide Weekly website, where we have a section with all our previous newsletters. But there's not an actual designed website for this. Maybe that's something that could be also, that could help to attract more people.
Yeah, it would be helpful to have where people can. I'm not sure how accessible that is at the moment, but obviously it also requires resources. So it depends funding, number of people, because to keep a website active probably requires some resources. But we can great to if there could be a website.
Yeah, I think I think if we have our social media pages like our Instagram and Twitter and other pages, and those are pages that anyone can access at any time. If there's a website sitting there that people could just visit and go through it.
And then I think Andrea commented, so I think this was the newsletters are trying to provide for evidence for evidence-based policymaking. What is missing is for our decision makers access the journal articles and use the information. In the past, made articles available to regulators, but very few asked for the full article. So I think if we go back to our section on the newsletter, so for example, we have a lot of research that is being released. So what we can track to see whether people click on it, where they're coming from, and whether they are coming from low and middle income countries. I think that is another layer of MailChimp that is available. I think maybe a challenge that we could say is looking back to the capacity issue in the beginning is the capacity to do all of like data analyzing of these information, because we're able to do it as far as we can within project timelines, but beyond a certain point, it's almost surface level information that we can pull from it, but it would probably take someone who works with data to really go deeper into all of the newsletters we share. But it's quite a timely process to just, for us to do these, when I do the 40 newsletters, so 20 newsletters in the middle of the year, 20 at the end of the year, and then trying to collate that to make, because we do bi-yearly, so we do it every 6 months, bi-yearly. And I know it does take a lot of time for me to just manually put all of the information from MailChimp into Excel, clean the data, and then analyze it, which it's not a quick task, especially when there's different layers in MailChimp that you have to go through to get information. Yeah, it's also not very, I know it's not very, it's a word automated, but if you click into one and you click out, it sort of scrolls the list all back up to the beginning. So it's quite a tedious process for us to get even just this information. So I think capacity is probably.
Capacity is also. Sorry, I see Debbie saying that the link between the research and implementation is not made by policymakers. So
okay. So Debbie says the link between research and implementation is not made by policymakers. So how can we overcome that? I think, is that something, is it in terms of comprehension that we need to then make sure our newsletters are easily understandable more than what they are now? I'm not sure how would we overcome that. Debbie, you're welcome to. You can also put on your microphone. We're not a lot in the group, so you're welcome to make verbal comments in the room.
Mentioned that consider other social media platforms as Facebook. We do share our newsletter.
So we have social media posts, and Eunice will share the links in the chat room if you're able to. So we have a LinkedIn page where we share information about discussions. We have an Instagram page. We have a Twitter page. But the same with all of these, I think when it comes down to e-communication, all of these different platforms have different ways that messages need to be brought across. So, for example, Instagram, you can't have a lengthy caption. You can't have pictures that are just documents. I think that's going to defeat. So also to know what target audience are for each different social media page. Twitter, you're limited to a certain amount of keys, so you can't, again, you need to have more punchy things. And even social media, there isn't a lot of people who are members of Facebook. So if it's Instagram, you're probably reaching your decision makers that are probably in their 30s. And if it's Twitter, it's probably a bit of an older crowd, since that's what they have. So it's all those things to consider, and it's different layers of information you're sharing. Instagram might be information that is really not in depth. It's just going to be punchy, picture-based, where Twitter you can use to share policy, and people will more likely engage with that. So I think that's another struggle where if we currently just share things as we base can. So on LinkedIn, you can share a document, but then to translate that to Instagram, it's quite, we have to make, again, so we don't have a social media campaign, someone who's managing or communications person, which I know is something we were discussing could be addressed, is to have someone who focuses on social media or communications. Please need a screenshot.
And
What was the screenshot?
No, they just moved the teams off of the screen so people can see Mentimeter.
Oh, I thought they're sharing sorry, I thought they're sharing just the page, even though they're sharing our screen. So if you had your hand up, you're welcome to unmute yourself and then just cut in. You all know. The other one said, I'm not in middle income countries. Others are better informed. Language and internet access are clear. Perhaps there is value in increasing engagement. Guest starts with other relevant networks, farmers, bookkeepers, academics to increase visibility and engagement. So I would say if it's relevant networks, would this be in low and middle income countries? And again, I think, yeah, it would definitely, technology can be an issue with some, not all.
Someone was trying to say something. I think it's Andrea. She had her hand up.
Andrea, you're welcome to unmute yourself.
Hi to everyone. And thanks so much, Tatum and Eunice, for the great job that you've been doing. Just very quickly, because I'm not in a private space that is quiet. One of the things I was thinking while I was listening to the presentation was whether we should actually be thinking about simplifying. I think maybe there's also the issue of information overload, and we've been trying so hard to really build the capacity of regulators and researchers in low and middle income countries. And so I'm wondering if we're actually trying too hard and whether we should try and simplify things and how we should simplify it. Thank you.
So I'll just go back to the newsletter. So perhaps we can move the discussion into this direction is, where do you, I'll scroll through it and you can again put your on Mentimeter or in the chat room, but where do you see opportunity for us to simplify? What information do you think is not relevant and what do you think is useful? So this is an open discussion, so please do. So far we have a feature article, which is an editorial. So an editorial that we write, and this is based on, like Eunice said, this was specifically on e-waste and circular economy. Another Pesticide Weekly, we follow a series. So because it's more frequent in the chemicals network, we would then every month have a different series. So this could potentially is quite wordy, something we could cut down on. But
we can't live in a Twitter-only world.
But that's a so I'm not sure if people can hear the chat. And we're struggling with, I guess, the different platforms and Twitter where it's so concise. And it's, yeah, so.
But can I ask a question of charity? So have you had any discussions with like UCT Marketing and Communications to see what they might be able to offer support?
No, we haven't.
Project House, UCT, gives UCT kudos. You know, and I get concerned that we often, you know, end up having to try and learn things that people kind of know how to do or may have a solution for, like, you know, how to kind of think quickly on it. So that's the one thing is what are, if not here with other member networks, what are the resources that are already available that could be used, could be brought in so you don't feel like you're kind of fighting the problem single-handedly or like having to reinvent things that people may know about. So I wondered.
So suggest us having like a meeting with them and discussing this, and they could probe.
And perhaps with media and journalists. Yeah. Journalist students, you know, journalism students. So, you know, what, you know, these kinds of issues are shared by, you know, how do we keep newspapers going? How many people get their news? You know, it's just a different form of media, but the questions remain kind of central questions that are being discussed amongst, you know, journalism and media professionals. So I wondered if that might be a way to
that would help us to improve. Yes.
So I know that in 2017, so initially the newsletters were in a different format, and 2017 we hired a specialist to design. So in MailChimp, they sort of designed this newsletter format. But I think a relevant point is that times change. And so 2017 is actually even pre-COVID, and I think COVID brought another layer to e-communication that we're all struggling with. It's overstimulation on the internet. There's just so many emails, and I'm not sure if everyone else found, but I found that there's just been an increase in workload after like post being back in office. You know, there's extra set of issues that's being faced. So I think it is relevant to actually restructure the newsletter completely. I know Eunice and I have been trying to redesign certain sections, but I think it's more than a design issue. It's more structuring issue.
And also, information access, because both worlds are now available, the physical world and the online world now. How do you keep up with both?
So Andrea says that we have thought about hiring a communications consultant for future projects. So we wonder whether UCT communication is an avenue that we can explore, and probably not at a cost since we can use UCT resources. Possibly students in media as well. They're always keen to help out and get exposure. So it's another thing we can look into.
That could be a good project. Help us redesign the newsletters.
I think, I mean, we have our success story section in the chemicals network newsletter. And I mean, I think that kind of helps to address what Debbie was saying about, you know, the research and implementation not really translating or not really being seen by policymakers, is that the research is not getting to implementation stages. I think like success stories, sharing success stories helps to identify, well, you know, this is what the research said, this is how we implemented it, and these were the challenges we faced in the middle. This is what didn't work, this is what didn't make sense. So I think, I don't know if we should consider like implementing something similar in the pesticide newsletters, like adding some form of success, something or other, learn from each other's success.
No, so I think definitely so perhaps something we could consider is, instead of having editorials, is just have success stories and have people then have their like the points that we want them to discuss within their questions or answers. And maybe even it would be useful for us to do live interviews. So to actually have put it on YouTube, but then have just a YouTube link to the newsletter so that people don't have to retype everything. I think everyone's just so busy. So the more organic it can be, which is a conversation, we can record it and put it up as a short 5-minute video. So not long. But then it's difficult to get resources in it. So with writing editorials, we can be like cited, and we kind of can quality control in a sense, which I think we find valuable, is being able to quality check the journals that we are sharing.
Coming back to,
but yeah, we have 5 minutes left, so we can maybe start to wrap up if anyone's last minute questions.
I just want to coming back to Prof. Akil's comment on the website, I think the website will be a good repository of these newsletters, because they're not only for now, but for future generations. Because sometimes you find yourself Googling anything, and then you find out a blog of someone who wrote it like in some years ago. So I think if we could, that could be a good repository of this information, so that even if it doesn't have now, someone could be looking at it in 1 year or 2 years, because the way they are now, people can't really access it just by Googling it. I think that could.
The digital footprint.
Of it. We can just access it.
I see Debbie's hand is raised. Maybe you can unmute.
Sorry, can I just throw a cat amongst the pigeons there quickly?
Sure.
Just a suggestion, maybe to use. I've been just chatting here in the chat box about LinkedIn with Prof. Maybe to just link the newsletter with LinkedIn, and using that as a platform, because there's a lot of people on LinkedIn that are also interested in chemicals and in pesticides, and also people looking for work in chemicals and pesticides on LinkedIn. So maybe to use LinkedIn as your base platform, and then you can almost use LinkedIn as your one-stop shop. So maybe use your LinkedIn as your platform to get your newsletter and your awareness out there, and also then attract people and sort of link the two together on people looking for jobs in the pesticide and chemicals field, and people looking for people to employ in the pesticide and chemicals field. Just a thought. Thanks.
No, thanks. And I think we set up a LinkedIn, so Eunice will share the link in the chat room, or just the handle, and you can find it on LinkedIn. So it is a new page, and we're trying to get more exposure out, so that's also something useful. And then I was just thinking in terms of the type of communication we share. I saw a comment that said we need to cover day-to-day situations such as proper disposal, e-waste, management of leachate from landfill. So I think that people are interested in practical information, which is something maybe more than just the news that we're sharing, which is just an overview of what happened, but something that's more practical. But I think just to conclude, for us, we're definitely going to take all of these into consideration. And I think we have been discussing, and Andrea has been asking us to change the way the newsletters are coming out. So I think this is useful for us to just use and consider and use UCT communications, to maybe change the information that's being shared, use of more videos and images. I think just to make it more appealing, but also not to lose that academic or evidence-based, rather, should I say, aspect to the newsletters, which I think is quite useful, so that the information that's going out is not just any information, it's actually things that have been peer reviewed, that we can comfortably say, this is something we would want to share. So to not dilute that or lose that in the process, I would say in terms of our newsletters is important. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining online as well as in the room. We had some technology issues at UCT, so we're glad we could have the session start today. And then just to thank Prof. Andrea Rother, who's in the chat room as well, for your input and just for overseeing this work. I think that, for all the years that it's been coming on, it really is good work, and it's something that can only go from strength to strength. So yeah, we're looking forward to doing some change, and we hope we can report back at a new meeting to say how things are different and maybe say what we would advise others to do. So thank you for your time, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.